Hi folks, Florida Man here, bringing you my usual helping of diplomacy commentary, and, in the case of this week, nostalgia. Because today we're going to another of the earliest online diplomacy games I've played. The game was called Simple Today, and it was played on the classic diplomacy map on playdiplomacy.com. This game was the first time I ever played as Italy, in a game of online diplomacy. Italy has always been a difficult and intimidating country for me to play, and you'll see that a bit in the way I treat this game. I'm not quite as bold as I was at certain points in my first game as Russia, and we'll see how well that works out for me. Since this is another golden oldie game, it's reconstructed via Backstabber. From the beginning of spring 1901, my plan in this game is to develop and execute on a strong relationship with Austria and try to eliminate Turkey first if possible. I also communicate with Russia and Turkey, and Austria also communicates with Turkey, but the plan does not change because of that. When orders process, I have moved Venice to Tuscany and Rome to Apulia. This was intended to give Austria a sense of comfort and allow him the maximum flexibility to open without worrying about a stab from the west. And sure enough, Austria opened south, aiming for maximum growth and the opportunity to take Greece in 1901. Unfortunately for Austria, Russia opened to Galicia. On the bright side, Turkey opened to Armenia, although very strangely, Turkey didn't open to the Black Sea, and neither did Russia, which seemed to suggest trust between them. It was a confusing situation. In the west, no one seemed to be attacking anyone early on. No one moved to Burgundy or the English Channel, and France's moves seemed to reflect concern about my possibly going to attack Marseille, rather than about either of his neighbors. Depending on the fall moves, this could have been a Western triple. I was just hoping France wouldn't pick a fight with me before I could establish my base of power in the east. In fall, France put his fleet in Portugal instead of Spain, and I breathed a little sigh of relief, because if he decided to attack me, he was not moving efficiently to make that happen. England convoyed into Belgium and moved Norwegian Sea into Norway, which probably made Russia feel a sense of relief. Unfortunately for the Russians, though, Germany chose to move Denmark to Sweden, balancing with Russia's move to the same center. To the south, I performed the typical convoy to Tunis. Austria tried to defend against an anticipated attack on Vienna, but Russia outguessed him and took Budapest. Austria kept Serbia and took Greece, though, and it turned out that Turkey was just pretending to be anti-Russian in spring, I suppose, because he moved out of Armenia and tried to take Serbia. It looked like we'd be facing a juggernaut, which I wasn't happy about, but this could have been a lot worse, because, in my opinion, Russia and Turkey were not making the best tactical plays. Russia opened with Sevastopol to Romania and left his army in Sevastopol, which was a bad play if you were going against Austria, because a fleet in Romania is like nipples on a fish. It's pretty useless, at least for Russia, against Austria. You can see on the map that Russia tried to use Romania to support Bulgaria to Serbia in fall, which is not a legal move for a fleet to make. On the other side, Turkey's spring moves were a waste, because all he did was convince us that maybe he was on our side, and his fall moves didn't get him anywhere or even allow him to bounce Austria out of Greece. Meanwhile, Austria and I had a stronger trust, I think, and we have a strong position at this point to attack and retake Budapest and attack Bulgaria and Romania soon after that. Tactics make a big difference when it's two powers versus two powers, and if these are our opponent's tactics, I think Austria and I are likely to win the fight. Also this season, France made a bizarre comment in the public press, denouncing Austria and proclaiming them as untrustworthy. When an anonymous commenter asked why he was saying this, France said Austria had proclaimed his hostile intentions and devious ways via a private message. Austria responded by denying having had any communication with France thus far. France accused Austria of slandering him. The whole exchange was pretty ridiculous, but also pretty funny. Someone who may have been me commented anonymously in the public press that it was interesting how the standoff between Russia and Turkey magically disappeared and turned into a coordinated push westward, and maybe a previous anonymous commenter's speculation about a broad alliance between the Austrians, Germans, and French was meant to draw attention away from this. In short, it looks like this was the very first game where I ever called out a juggernaut in the public press. Accurately, of course, because if there's one thing you know about Florida Man, it's that I am scrupulously honest. In the build phase, Austria gets an army in Trieste, and I get a fleet in Naples, which will complement our current strategy for disassembling Turkey and Russia. France built a fleet in Brest and an army in Marseille, which suggested a plan to attack the English rather than me, so I was happy about that. Germany got a fleet and an army which would hopefully be used against Russia. England got two fleets built in locations that suggested he wasn't hostile to France, and Russia built an army in Warsaw and a fleet in St. Pete's north coast. I thought that may have been a mistake, because I thought he might need another army if he was going to be dealing with us. But his mistakes would be our gains. In spring 1902, realizing that he couldn't retain Budapest, Russia moved Budapest to Romania, Romania to Sevastopol, Sevastopol to Ukraine, and Warsaw to Galicia to try to get a stronger position for the next phase of the war. As Russia probably anticipated, Austria retook Budapest immediately. Austria also supported me into the Aegean Sea, which was possible because he had Greece, thank goodness. Turkey moved against Russia again, which I didn't care about either way. I think Austria talked him into that, but it wasn't going to end up being a good move because I was going to go after Turkey either way. To the north, Russia moved into Sweden successfully. England tried to support Germany into Sweden, but Germany didn't take it, instead moving Denmark to Skagerrak and Kiel to Denmark, probably so he'd be able to support himself attacking Sweden in fall. France moved in a very anti-English way, attempting to occupy the Channel, although England supported himself in and prevented that. But France did get into the mid-Atlantic and positioned to possibly take Belgium from England. In fall, England and Germany made a big swing against Russia in the north, taking Barents Sea and Sweden. Russia thought he could persuade Germany over to his side by offering to support Germany into Norway, and so Sweden and St. Pete did that, but Germany did not join Russia's side. Unfortunately for England, Germany was not a faithful ally on all fronts. He and France attacked Belgium together, and France took the Channel by force, leaving England in a weaker position at the end of the year than he was at the beginning. In the southeast, I convoyed into Bulgaria with Austrian support, and neither Turkey or Russia was really able to do anything. They weren't working together in any meaningful way, and Turkey didn't seem to know where he wanted to go, while Russia was too cautious to do anything but hold on to Romania and Galicia. With the build phase, Russia was down to 3 armies and 1 fleet in the south, and a trapped and useless fleet in the north coast of St. Pete. Turkey destroyed his only fleet. Austria and I made the same builds as last time, Fleet Naples and Army Trieste. Germany again built an army and a fleet, putting him in a strong position to go in whichever direction he wanted to, as far as I could tell. In spring 1903, England failed to enter orders, resulting in France being able to successfully convoy into Wales, and Germany being able to easily take Norway. It also kept Russia from probably losing St. Pete to England this season. France pulled out of Burgundy, and Germany moved a fleet into Helgoland and Bight and moved units away from Munich, showing that their partnership against England was making them both rather trusting of each other. In the southeast, Russia made the bad decision to try and get a piece of Turkey rather than to fight Austria with everything possible, resulting in the loss of Romania to Austria. At the same time, I moved into East Mediterranean, positioning for attacks on the Turkish homeland. In fall, I successfully convoyed into Constantinople, supporting that move from Bulgaria, and tapping Smyrna to cut any possible support from there. Turkey defended Ankara by moving Smyrna to Ankara and Armenia to Smyrna, which both bounced, but was a very effective defense of those spaces. Austria forced Galicia and retained Romania, which was only possible here because Russia again divided his focus unwisely, trying to simultaneously retake Romania and walk into Ankara unsupported, which resulted in neither maneuver succeeding. At this point, the war in the east was all but won for me and Austria. In the northwest, France walked into Irish Sea and supported himself into London. England was moving again. He explained that he'd missed the last season because he was in the hospital, but it was too late to really make a difference. He had returned just in time to lose London and North Sea and to rush to defend Edinburgh, which wasn't under attack. Interestingly, Germany, perhaps sensing that the fight with England was almost over already, had moved an army east to harass Russia, and that army now moved from Prussia to Livonia, presumably planning to open a northern front against Russia and join those of us taking Russia down from the south. In the build phase, England was reduced to fleets already sitting on his island, Russia made the bad decision to destroy his Sevastopol army, and France, Germany, Austria, and I each got a new army. This was my first time putting an army in Venice since 1901, a reflection of the trust Austria and I had built with each other. I was only putting one there now so that I wouldn't be totally unbalanced and vulnerable to a sudden stab, while Austria was showing his faith in me by building an army rather than a fleet, as we'd agreed. In spring 1904, France and I bounced in Piedmont, which I took to be a part of the beginning of a new direction of expansion by France, and which was certainly meant to be a part of expanding west for me. I also moved into the Tyrrhenian Sea. In the east, I took Smyrna, and in Ankara, Russia, Turkey, and I all bounced. Russia continued to make strange defensive choices, supporting Ukraine into Moscow, which allowed Austria to take Ukraine without opposition. Austria also supported himself into Tyrolia to counter the Franco-German alliance, possibly moving to attack us. To the north, Germany was pulling his armies slightly east, trying to prepare to attack either Austria or Russia, and Germany actually took St. Pete from Russia. To his west, France walked into Liverpool unopposed, almost as if England was no longer in the game at all. Again, apparently England had been in the hospital during that missed phase, which was a shame, because he was clearly trying hard to play his position to the end, and his time was almost certainly cut shorter than it otherwise would have been because of that missed season. Fortunately, I believe everything turned out alright medically at least. In fall, Russia continued to fail at running his military, losing Moscow and Sevastopol due to his inaction. Austria took Sevastopol, and Germany took Moscow, and Russia didn't try to defend either center. Russia did remember that he wanted Ankara, however, so he annoyingly bounced me there again. Turkey moved to Armenia, so he could bounce me himself next time. I followed through on my burgeoning attack on France from spring, occupying Piedmont and the West Mediterranean so I could go after Marseille and or Spain next year. To the west, England was almost dead, and was only successful in defending Edinburgh, which meant France needed a new opponent. He decided to support Austria into Munich, but Germany succeeded in countering that. Although I don't think he actually saw it coming, he supported Kiel into Munich, I think because he knew Austria had a unit next to Munich and that he was moving out of Munich, not because he was expecting a supported attack on Munich. The result of this season meant unexpected new challenges for both Germany and France. In the build phase, France built a fleet in Brest, while Germany and Austria built armies, and I built a fleet in Naples. Russia was left with only Warsaw, making him as weak as Turkey and England. In spring 1905, Germany tried to kill off the Russians with support from Moscow, but Austria cut that support. Austria and France made another unsuccessful effort to assail Munich, but instead Germany took Burgundy. At the same time, despite telling France that I'd back off of Spain and Marseille, I instead walked right into Spain and Marseille, putting him in pretty big trouble. I also positioned to force Ankara and finish Turkey off in the fall. Germany took Edinburgh and positioned to attack Warsaw more forcefully in the fall, but Austria positioned to do the same thing, and Austria had more armies on the Russian front than Germany did. It was after this season had processed that Germany proposed a three-power draw between himself, me, and Austria, which Austria and I accepted, and France naturally rejected. I proposed a draw that would include France, which in retrospect is a bizarre decision to me. I can't imagine why I was willing to draw with France when I was doing so well against him and was probably just going to get more secure in my position, especially because I was in such a strong and secure alliance with Austria. The only excuse I can come up with, reviewing my situation, is that I was nervous about the fact that I was playing as Italy, which is notoriously weak and which I didn't feel confident about yet. I must have figured that if the game continued long enough, my good fortune would run out, and Austria would betray me, or I would start losing fights for some other reason. When fall orders processed, Austria and France surrounded Germany. France basically ignored my attack, and the one center powers all died, which caused the draw to go through. Looking at the final position on this map, I think I made a terrible mistake by not continuing to fight in this game. I should have walked into Portugal and Mid-Atlantic Ocean. France was only getting weaker, not stronger, and Austria and I weren't exactly wary of each other in our troop orientations. I think I would probably have had a good opportunity to stab Austria fairly soon. And even if I stabbed Austria from the final position of the board when the game ended, I could have guaranteed Serbia and Greece, and probably taken Romania and Sevastopol too. Austria was stuck in a fight with a fairly tactically competent German player, and if the game continued, I think he would have continued to be embroiled in a much tougher fight than my fight with France. In short, this game was probably the first time I gave up what should have been a win, accepting a draw that should at least have excluded one or two of the powers who were parties to it, and probably not me. It's a regrettable result, and I recognized it even soon after the draw went through. Today I would certainly do things differently. It just goes to show that a certain amount of arrogance is an asset in diplomacy. If you don't believe you're the best, or one of the best, you won't act with the confidence you need to have to reject a draw, which is to say, no, you don't deserve to stand in the winner's circle with me. I am better. I have played better, and earned a higher place, and you must acknowledge that if you want this game to be over. It's really a pretty conceited thing to assert when you think about it, though of course not in those words, maybe more like, I am the one who knocks, and stay out of my territory. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this diplomacy commentary and voice acting session. You know what to do. Give me your likes, your subscribes, your typed comments yearning to breathe free. And if you want to be a part of my huddled masses, my tempest-tossed community, I invite you to join my Discord, linked in the description. If you want to be one of my credited supporters whose names now appear on screen, you can give us your additional support with Patreon contributions or subtitle translations, and join the Alligator Army, who lift our lamp beside the golden door to diplomacy knowledge. Until next time, Florida Man, out.